Okay, almost done with the very basics of Redux, but there's just one more piece I want to cover before we move forward, and that's to talk about action creators. And action creators are very commonly used inside our reducers, or they would be extracted into a separate file. And what our action creators are is just simple functions that return our action types. And let's just take a look at a couple of very quick and simple examples just so that you have the full Redux terminology covered based on how we would or used to create our Redux reducers. And these functions would often go in a separate file called, in this case it would be called counter actions, but we'll do everything in the same file just for convenience. So just below our initial state, I'm going to export a couple of functions, and the first function is going to be called increment. And we can pass an argument, so I'm going to say amount, and I'm going to give it a default value equal to 1. And these action creators simply return an object, and we specify the type, and in this case it's going to be for our increment counter. And then if we had a payload, we would specify that inside here as well. And earlier we didn't use a payload because we were just going up by 1 or down by 1 depending on the increment. But if we take a payload, we can have a button that specifies a different amount, for example. So then we would specify payload, which would be the argument, and in this case it's going to be 1, but we'll set payload to the amount. And it's going to be 1 by default, but we can override that and pass it a value. So let's do the same, but for decrement. And again, the amount will be 1 by default, but the payload is going to stay the same, and I'm just going to change decrement or increment for decrement. And then inside the counter reducer, instead of hard-coded 1, the amount is going to be the action.payload. And I'll do the same for the second one as well. So then we can go and use these action creators inside our contact page instead of the type object or the object with the type argument inside here. Instead of using these, what we can specify is that we want to decrement and bring in that decrement function we've created, or we can increment inside the dispatch and again bring in this function as well from our counter reducer, and we can remove the other imports as well. But let's just create a third button just for example's sake, and we'll specify an argument of 5 inside this one, and we'll make it a different color button, and we'll just say increment by 5 as the button name. So this time we're passing an argument that's going to go to our counter reducer as the payload, and then when we're incrementing the counter, if the payload is 5, obviously, then that's what it's going to set the data to. So let's go take a look and make sure we've got this functionality. Redux does seem to make our application stick, so I do need to refresh my browser quite often here. But what we should find is that the decrement and the increment are both working fine, and our increment by 5 function is working fine as well. So those actions, or those action creators, are dispatching that to our Redux store. It's updating the data property, and it's causing our component to re-render once that new state is then available. So this is the absolute basics of Redux. We've started really simply, and what we'll take a look at next is using Redux Toolkit to do pretty much the same thing, but with a bit less boilerplates than we used thus far.